All right, hopefully we're back. Yeah, okay. The microphone doesn't look like it's working. There it goes. All right. So annual reports, those are generally filed with the SEC. Press conferences where you announce stuff. Apple does this a lot. They'll hold a press conference every time they release a new iPhone or a new product. They'll invite the members of the press and public to come in. And the disadvantage of public relations is that it's generally cheap. It's free in many instances to send out press reports, but you can lose control of the message because the news media that picks it up may distort what it is that you want to say. You're not paying for it, so they can put their own spin on it. Sales promotions. These are usually short-term inducements to arouse interest in a product. These are used largely in consumer packaged goods with the introduction or launch of a product. And they take the form of coupons, rebates, samples, contests, sweepstakes. The advantage is that it can stimulate sales for the duration of the sales promotion. The disadvantage is that at the end, people may not be brand loyal. One of the things that my business did, that my family's business did, is when Groupon first came out, how many of you have used Groupon? Okay, one. When Groupon first came out, we decided that we would try Groupon as a way of just seeing, if we could generate some new interest in doing the murder mysteries at the Stone Lion Inn. And so we took out a Groupon, and we had a huge success in terms of the number of sales of that Groupon. But one of the things that we found, and one of the things that many restaurants have found that made Groupon less attractive to a lot of them, is that people who are interested in that, which is basically electronic couponing, are not very brand loyal. They're looking for the next deal, right? So they'll get your Groupon, and as soon as they've used it, they'll move on to the next Groupon deal of the day. And so it's not necessarily advantageous in terms of building brand loyalty among consumers. Direct marketing, face-to-face selling, so personal selling, direct mail, catalogs, telephone, online. Telephone at one point in time had sort of disappeared because of the no-call list, and then they destroyed the no-call list. And so how many of you have gotten calls from individuals now because the cell phone numbers are now out there and the no-call list is no longer really all that beneficial? How many of you have gotten text messages from people that you don't want text messages from? How many of you have gotten scam text messages telling you that you owe a toll and, if you don't pay it, you face severe legal consequences and things like that? So telephone was one that had sort of died. Online is another one, obviously. You can customize these to match the needs of a target. Usually it can be adapted quickly, particularly if you're talking about professional selling. The disadvantage is that it does require that you have up-to-date databases. And there are growing concerns about privacy with regard to the amount of information that we're keeping. As a result of mobile media marketing, which is direct marketing, we now are seeing companies able to collect voluminous amounts of data on you. How do they do that? Well, they can now, if you are using apps that allow them to track your movement, and people do this all the time, they just sort of don't read through the privacy stuff. They, will know that you're near a Starbucks, or you're near, if you use the McDonald's app, They know which McDonald's is the closest to you, right? And they can use that to give you deals and information and things like that. Now, marketers would like you to believe, and I think, marketing is a tool, and it's like a hammer. You can use a hammer to build a house or to destroy something. You can smash something to bits with a hammer. And marketing is a tool just the same. You can use it for great amounts of good. I mean, we get a whole lot of stuff as a result of this device, but we're also giving up a whole lot of stuff. We're giving up an enormous amount of our privacy. Now, I don't know that your generation cares that much about that, as much as my generation cared about it. Because I can look at the stuff that, you all post. When I first started teaching here at UCO, I was 22 years old, and I was younger than most of my students at the time. The average age of our freshmen at UCO was 29, and so I was significantly younger than a lot of people here in terms of the student body population. That has changed. We have become a much more traditional campus and less a non-traditional campus. And there's certain, number of reasons for that. The largest of which is that when the economy is good, which it's been good for quite a while, people have a tendency to, if you're in your 30s or 40s, not go to school, to stay in the workforce. If the economy is bad, people have a tendency to then go in for retraining. And so, the age fluctuates and varies, but at the time it was very non-traditional. As I got to be older, I started using social media because I noticed that I was not as relevant to my students as I once was. And so from time to time, students would send me, requests on Facebook, and now it's LinkedIn. A lot of my students want to connect on LinkedIn to be part of their professional network, and that's a more professional sort of form of social media marketing. And I would notice that students would post things that I was like, oh my God, if an employer sees this, they might think twice about hiring you. And I'm not sure that's a good idea, but your generation is so comfortable with living your life in the public sphere that I don't think that you think about it as much as my generation does in terms of privacy. And can you have any privacy? So I had, for just another example, one of my friends who's a conspiracy theorist posted on Facebook the other day that she would never allow herself or her children to be chipped. And I don't know if I would allow myself to be chipped, but my response was, she's like, that just allows the government to track you. My response is, they do that now. Can you, if the government wants to find you, can you escape it? This device is constantly capable of being monitored where you are. Every purchase you make is instantly trackable if you're using a credit card. And how many of you actually carry and pay with cash anymore? During COVID, almost nobody would take it because they were concerned in the early stages of COVID that you could transmit the virus through, touching of surfaces and things like that. And so a lot of places went cashless. If you go to a lot of events anymore, they're cashless. And so even if you want to sort of escape this, can you? Because the government can track it. One of the reasons that Walmart is the only major retailer I know of that won't let you, have you noticed this? If you've gone into Walmart, you can't tap to pay. And you know why you can't tap to pay at Walmart? Because the tap to pay shares data with the companies. that they then sell, and Walmart won't do it. And so those machines, the card readers at the Walmart checkout, have the capability of being tap to pay, and they won't allow you to do it. Will they eventually? I think they'll have to, because just like magnetic strips replaced the sort of traditional way of processing credit cards, which was you ran it through, and I remember this in my mother's business when we would get credit cards, in the 80s and 90s, we had this machine that sat on the desk that you put the credit card, I don't know if I have any credit cards that have any raised numbers on them anymore. I don't think I do. No, I don't. I think they've all switched over. Oh, I do. I have one debit card that has these raised numbers, and you would put this card into this machine, and then you'd run it through, and you would submit. It had triplicate forms, and you would keep one copy, give one copy to the customer, and then send one copy in your deposits to the bank, who would then process the credit cards for the batch for you. Now that's all done through electronic funds transfers, right? And so the magnetic strip replaced those manual readers or manual scanners that imprinted the number, and replaced having to take the deposit to the bank with a direct deposit into your bank account. And so this now allows for an enormous amount of information to be collected on you. And can you truly escape, if the government wants to find you? It's really, really hard. It would be really, really hard. If you have a car that's been made or manufactured in the last 10 years, it probably has some kind of GPS in it, and they can track that. And so, it's not really possible in the modern era, in the United States at least, to go live off the grid. Now that's got both advantages and disadvantages. What are the advantages? Well, we get things a lot quicker, a lot easier than we used to. It allows for tracking of stuff a lot easier than it was in the past. The optical scanners that can read addresses and send things out allow for delivery that's very, very rapid in the modern world. The disadvantage is, again, we've lost a lot of our privacy to this rapidly integrated world. So how do you develop a promotional mix? So you've got to first decide whether you're targeting an intermediary, a consumer, or both. Some companies sell both through intermediaries. Dell is an example of that. Historically, Dell was a direct-to-consumer product, and you called and you ordered the Dell, and they shipped you the computer that had everything that you wanted. I think these are Dell monitors. Yes, they are. They're Dell monitors. And it was a customized suite of programs and storage capacity and RAM and things like that you wanted. And they sent it directly to you. They've started selling in stores now. Why? Because people actually want to go and try out, for example, particularly laptops, to see if they can use them. So are you selling to an intermediary, a consumer, or both? And then you've got to select the best method to reach the target. If you are doing direct consumer marketing, mobile marketing, social media marketing is becoming one of the most predominant waves, unless you are targeting a older population, right? So if you watch television, which I'm sure most of you don't anymore, because why would you watch television when you can, watch YouTube on your phone, and you can skip through all the advertisements and stuff like that. But if you watch the traditional shows on TV, there are lots of ads for the Medicare Advantage programs that are targeting, right? And they have a phone number for people to call because that generation still wants to call and engage that way. They're probably less likely to use the phone, whereas you all, if we're targeting you, it's easier to use social media marketing, use QR codes and things like that to provide the information in a way that you want. So the product life cycle is important. Is this the introduction of a new product or service? If it is, the purpose is going to try and get people informed about the product or service. Are you in the growth stage of the product or service where you're trying to persuade people to actually purchase the product? If you're in the maturity, it's to remind people. Why is it that Coca-Cola still advertises, has all of these ads? At one time, Coca-Cola was the #1 most valuable brand in the world. There was something in the Carter administration called the Coca-Cola Connection, which was his Attorney General Bell had been a general counsel for Coca-Cola. His Secretary of State Vance had been on the board of directors of Coca-Cola. The Secretary of Commerce had been, I think, the CEO of Coca-Cola. And what was the first product that we sent to communist China when we started engaging with the Chinese in trade relations? Coca-Cola was the first product that we sent. This was called the Coca-Cola Connection. And so, you know, why is it that a brand like Coca-Cola still advertises when we all know what Coca-Cola is? And by the way, I think it's probably in the United States in the declining stage because most people recognize that this product is really not all that healthy. How many calories are in a 12-ounce can of Coke? A lot. It's a lot of sugar. And it's, you know, probably not great for you, but in other parts of the world, it's not in the decline. So why is it the Coca-Cola advertised? Well, to keep people reminded of, you know, the feelings that they had of, you know, drinking a Coke. Also, the product characteristics are important factors like the complexity of the product. Are you going to have to spend a lot of time? When the iPhone first came out, this technology was fairly different than everything else. Now, you all are probably too young, I mean, to remember, but you know, you had to teach people to pinch the screen to get it to go, or to reverse pinch in order to make the screen bigger, because there were not a lot of experiences at that point with touchscreen technology. Now it's touchscreen technology, not just on your iPhones, not just on your tablets, but also computer screens are now becoming touchscreen. And I'm not sure that that's all that wonderful. You know, I think it's an interesting feature. Not sure how helpful it actually is, but that's something that took quite a bit of learning to get people to understand. What is the risk involved? Things like when the iPhone was launched, it was really expensive compared to other phones. It was $1,000 or something like that. And that was really, really expensive compared to what you could get a flip phone, you know, from Motorola or one of the other companies for. So the risk was pretty great. And what are the ancillary services that you are providing and that need to be provided to go along with this? So with regard to the iPhone, this is really not a phone anymore. I mean, you can talk on it, but most of you don't. Most of you probably spend more time communicating by text with your friends than you do actually talking, because your generation doesn't really like to talk on the phone. My generation loved to talk on the phone. That's one of the things that was a big deal. When I was a kid growing up, my brother and I had our own phone line, which was a really big thing. Now every kid in the house, my brother has 4 kids, all of them at a very early age got iPhones so that, that their parents could find them and could communicate with them. And so, what are the ancillary services? Well, iPhone has a whole lot that they offer, right? Through the App Store that they have. And so that's another consideration that you have to think about when you're thinking about developing your promotional mix. What stage of the buying decision is your consumer base in? Are they, if you're again in the introductory stage, in the pre-purchase, where you're going to do advertising, and if you've got consumer packaged goods that are cheap, you can offer samples. They used to do this a lot. They don't do it so much anymore. It's become less of a thing. It used to be when we first started purchasing from Sam's Club for our business, that Sam's had all of these people that would hand out samples, and you could like make a whole meal out of going around and trying the different samples at Sam's. They don't really do that as much as they used to, and you don't get as many samples in the mail as you used to. As a professor, one of the things that they used to do when I first started teaching was they would mail me literally every semester. I would get probably 7 or 8 or 9 new textbooks that would be shipped to my office for me to look at, because the textbook publishers were trying to get us to adopt them. Now it's all online. If we want a hard copy, we have to request it. They'll give us access through McGraw-Hill Connect, for example, for most of the textbooks that we use. Is this the purchase phase, where you're going to use personal selling or sales promotion? Post-purchase advertising can be used to reduce anxiety, remind consumers of the benefits. Why is it that Ford F-150, and they say this over and over and over again on their ads, the #1 selling truck in America for 30 years running? Why is it that they say that? Well, it reassures purchasers of the Ford F-150 that you bought a great product, and when you go to rebuy, because you need that product, you need a new one, are you going to buy a Ford? So the channel strategies that you use, is it a push strategy? This is seen in, and we can see a split occurring in the pharmaceutical industry that used to use a push strategy, where sales reps would go to doctors. And at one point in time, my family's business made a lot of money because we do these murder mystery weekends, and the drug companies would come to us and they would ask us to write their drug that they were trying to sell into the murder mysteries. And then they would get all these doctors to come up and do a murder mystery, and they would try to get the doctors to write prescription. That's a push strategy. You're trying to get the doctors to write the prescription. It's not a direct, you can't see a direct impact, right? So you're trying to get the doctors to become familiar with the drug, become aware of the drug, and then prescribe the drug. They changed the rules on that, and so you can no longer do that. If you give them something that's more than a de minimis gift, and they may have to declare it on their taxes, so doctors don't want it. So they've gone to a pull strategy, which is advertising to consumers to get them to be aware of the drugs that are out there, and trying to get them to go to their doctor and say, I think I've got anxiety, I can't sleep, or whatever. Sorry. I apologize. I've had a bunch of allergy problems the last couple of days. So what makes an ad great? And next time, what I want you to do is in your groups come up with an ad. I think we talked a little bit about this last time. Come up with an ad that we're going to watch and tell me what you think makes the ad great. Well, there are two things why that make an ad great, in my opinion. It delivers or engages the mind of the consumer. So it tells a compelling story. Ads are oftentimes like little movies. It engages the mind of the consumer. And it delivers a selling message. So in your groups, and I'll give you the rest of the class to do this, come up with some ads and we'll talk about what you come up with next time, and we'll look at some that do one or the other, but maybe not both, to give you an idea of how you can improve the ads to make them do both of those things. Any questions?
Can we come up with our own ads, or we pick an ad?
No, find an ad.